for what we take on, for what we put our officers through, what they go through, the least that we could do is make sure that we take care of them. Right. If you look at your belt, you got every tool on your belt to take every situation, but one tool you don't have on your belt is a wellness tool.
It's just like the military. You can't do that day in and day out and then just go back into a regular life and I'm walking down the street with my kids. You can't do that because every little trigger that has happened to you in your job puts you right back to where you were at that time in that place. Listen, when I got one through Alltel, through a friend of mine on a trial, and worked my first wreck, and they sent me my times and my number on that thing. But I thought I was the bomb diggity, man. I thought I had it.
And here we are doing podcasts.
Yeah. See, that's a generational thing. You just said bomb diggity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's people in the room that have no idea.
That's how it's going to start. That's how it's going to start. You're just going to hear bomb diggity, and then we're jumping in right in. Oh, of course he is.
Of course he's rolling.
Hey guys, today's episode is all about the bomb diggity. Bring me the tears.
Cry for me.
Oh, it was supposed to be cry for me. Hey guys, we're sitting around having a lot of fun this afternoon. Welcome to the 10-8 podcast. My name is Chris Chapman. I'm the director for the Law Enforcement Standards and Training for the state of Arkansas. Joined by our co-host, Chris Clem, Dr.
Hello.
Chris Clem, Deputy Director Jason Lawrence, and Deputy Director Kelvin Sargent. With our special guest from the Arkansas State Police finest, Sergeant Chuck Lewis and Zach Owens. What a great couple guys we got on the couch with us. I actually switched. Did I get that right? I got that right?
Yeah,
okay.
you're good.
All right, so before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe. I hear we're over 300 now. We're looking for 301 by the end of the day. So please like and subscribe to the 10-8 podcast. Glad to have you guys here today. We're going to talk about some of our favorite things: leadership, wellness, resiliency, and two of my favorite people, honestly.
Yep.
Since joining this division, this department, come to respect and admire both of you tremendously, and just want to have a conversation today. So why don't you take the opportunity to introduce yourselves? I mean, you're looking good. We talk about bearing all the time.
That's right.
That uniform is squared away. Boots are polished.
Appreciate that.
How are you,
The
sir?
Arkansas.
Yeah, the Arkansas State Police.
The Arkansas State Police. So I'm Zach Owens, and I say Zach Owens before giving title. Because my mom stressed that she gave me my name before there was ever a title in front of my name.
Wow. Amen to that.
And so I hold true to that. But through my title, I'm Sergeant Zach Owens with the Arkansas State Police. So glad to be here today.
You know, I sign every one of my emails Chris, just because I believe in that same philosophy.
Right.
This is who I am. The title means absolutely nothing to me.
Correct.
You know, and I would rather have that respect. So I appreciate you starting us off like that.
Thank you.
So I'm Chuck Lewis, the Arkansas State Police, and I'm the same way. I 29 years. I'll have 30 years in the end of this year.
Wow.
I'll have 32. Actually, have 32 in law enforcement now. But in the many things I've done with the state police, I was a troop service officer at Troop A for a while and had CDL testing. And of all the jobs I've done as far as with the state police, I learned a lot, giving little Cindy and little Joe their driver's test, and that taught me as much as anything about I'm Chuck. In fact, even since that time in my career, even on traffic stops, I'm Chuck. The kids didn't care what a title was, didn't know what a title meant, and a lot of guys use Trooper Lewis, and I. Actually, if I say something, a lot of times that's what I'll say. But the title is nothing. The person behind the badge, their character and their actions make the title.
Wow.
And so it's just Chuck. And most time I'll say I'm Chuck with a little C because that's just.
So for a short period of time, I was the PIO between different stints at the department. And we did a series of the heart behind the badge. And you guys exemplify the meaning of that, both of you. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
heart and service oriented. It's just really appreciate that. Now, both of you had prior experience before state police, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, Zach, you were at Malvern and Siloam Springs.
No,
or where at?
Lone Oak County Sheriff. I worked
Lone Oak County.
Worked a little bit at Carlisle
Yeah.
PD, and then I worked Sheriff Isaac,
Yep.
and worked part time for them for several years before coming to state police.
Well, the state police sure is lucky to have both of you.
Well, thank you.
So
Thank you, sir.
they won on that end of the house. So let's talk about the work you guys are currently doing. I know, Zach, you do some recruiting as well as other duties, but both of you are really invested in the wellness, leadership, and resiliency of not only just the Arkansas State Police, but law enforcement across the state. How did you guys get involved with the wellness program? Just kind of tell us about that journey. What brought you here?
Well, I kind of let Chuck, really go into the details of it, but at some point, was it 06, 08?
08.
08. The state police, of course, really saw the need, for a wellness team. So we got established with, was it the Nova?
Nova.
The
Yeah.
Nova. And nevertheless, so we started partnering up, of course, making sure that the officers was taking the classes, the training for the peer-to-peer, the group support, and so forth. And at some point, I think it was offered as those who had interest in it as opposed to just selecting somebody.
Right.
That way, maybe that peer would have more dedication and interest, as opposed to just being selected to a detail. And so, of course, I've always had a compassion to help not only on the highway, but, in any field or any area that I could.
So what year did the state police start the wellness program?
It was called the Arkansas Crisis Response Team.
Right.
And there were 25 civilian and 25 commissioned.
Right.
And that was in 2008.
So
It
I
started-
remember that. You had regional teams at the time?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so that grew into the wellness unit that we see today.
That's correct. There was a long time ago, state police used chaplains, and there were some from actually years back, and then that crisis response team put the chaplains back in, and there was a couple of us, Zach and myself. There was a couple more that actually traveled more than the others, and we did natural disasters, we did officer involved shootings, we did critical incidents. We actually went one year, Mena. I forgot what year it was. It was 9 or 10, but they had a tornado come through. And we ended up, several of us ended up at the school. And unbeknownst to us, we thought we were going to be helping teachers. And a couple of teachers put us in front of a couple of classrooms, and we ended up talking to kids. And the only thing that saved my lunch on that is I had, at the time, my daughter Scarlett was young. And that was the only thing that saved us. But we actually ended up hitting a home run on that deal, and that actually kick-started the team to do other things. And it was purely by God's grace that we survived that day. But we spent actually a day and a half helping at the school, just talking to kids.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, when you think about how this has taken the different routes we've gone, and now we're doing statewide wellness initiatives. We're relaunching the chaplain program this year statewide. Yes. We're hoping to have 100 chaplains. We're getting ready to do the peer training. You and I were talking about that a little while ago. So it's exciting to see what started in 08. Now we're expanding across the state.
It is. And we were talking about before we got started some of the stories and stuff, and some of the heartfelt stories from the ones that we were trying to help, that we've learned so much from helping, and where we are from where we were then to where we are now, and that's what I tell everybody. A lot of people ask, how did you get into this? And same thing as Zach, wanting to help people, but I learned more about how to help people by helping, not doing the right thing, and trial and error, and we were real fortunate. We got to go to a lot of classes and stuff. Nova was some of the first stuff we did, and a lot of the Nova stuff is actually still practiced today. It's different things, but watching people go through a traumatic event, and the biggest thing you can do is listen, and that's where I've done most of the learning that I've done to help people, is from listening to other people and watching them move forward from that.
That's awesome.
Well, 2008, though, you guys were ahead of the curve. Because in 2008, we weren't having conversations on a
No,
regular
sir.
basis
That's
about
correct.
wellness and resiliency.
The state was way ahead of the curve at that particular point.
Absolutely. And it wasn't, so coming from a local agency, aware that you guys were doing that, it still wasn't really accepted. You guys were, if you responded, obviously you were part of the situation and accepted then, but we didn't want to accept the fact that
No,
we
sir.
needed the help, right?
No, sir. That's correct.
There's the stigma was still there. So talk about the difference that you see from over the last 15 years, right? So where you are now to compared to where you were now then. The number of responses, the openness people have to having these conversations. We just had a young lady sitting on the couch and involved in a very, very serious accident, nearly took her life. And she started her mental recovery before she started her physical recovery. Wow. And she identified herself that she needed to do that. I don't know that we would have had that mindset.
No,
I know
sir.
we didn't have that mindset
No, sir.
15 years ago.
No, sir. I for sure did not.
From what I'm seeing, it's very different. It was almost back when I started. It was put a Band-Aid on it.
Oh, yeah.
Temporary patch, get back out. In the game. The culture's changed so much now to where, with it being taught into the early stages of these new officers as they come through, they know they have more than a Band-Aid. They have a whole wellness kit. So with having that wellness kit, now they're looking forward to knowing that it doesn't make them any less of an officer, doesn't make them any less, of qualified, to do the position. Now they know it's the comfort of saying that, hey, if there's something that I just need a little bit of extra, talking to or to discuss something with, that's there. So now the expectation, you kind of have is if you go through different things that I can go to this, and it's almost kind of that mindset is, or if I go through this, this is going to happen, and so I don't know if I can't speak for Chuck, but from what I'm seeing is when traumatic events are happening, command staffs are reaching out or officers are reaching out and they're like, hey, let's hook you up with this, wellness team or, this peer. So I'm seeing very receptive now, for wellness, and officers are really putting that out there, to their subordinates, and the administration are putting it out there to their supervisors. So
why do you think that changed?
Oh, that's a good question. I want to say that, in my opinion, when you see too many of your children hurt, as a parent,
Keep preaching.
At some point, you got to figure out what's going on with your children. And so to fix that, I think it's been a worldwide need of saying that, like, hey, for what we take on, for what we put our officers through, what they go through, the least that we could do is make sure that we take care of them. Right. If you look at your belt, you got every tool on your belt to take every situation, but one tool you don't have on your belt is a wellness tool.
Yeah. How do you take care of this and this?
You got to take care of that. So that's just some of the things that I think I've seen.
And as we talk about it, because there's a lot of law enforcement experience in this room, and you're at that ability that I love your example. Put a Band-Aid on it, man. Guess what? Traumatic event. 2 days later, get back.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Stole that from Marcus Luttrell. Suck it up, Buttercup.
And so there you go. You got to get back to it. But I mean, that change, and I don't know if it's finally some of us who have gone through those traumatic events and we have went, this needs to change because it should have changed for me. Maybe we're in that position now.
Yeah, and not to talk negatively about anybody that previously held leadership positions, but across this state right now, you have chiefs and sheriffs, colonels, directors in positions where this is accepted for them and they're pushing this.
You bet.
And that's something I don't know that we had 15 years ago.
No, we don't.
We didn't have it.
No, sir.
No.
So the before, a lot of the ones I got involved with were the ones that had been involved in something or had personally something that happened, and they were already on the downward spiral. They were not active. They were missing calls. They were not answering calls, not active as far as making stops. And some of them were supervisors. Some of them were friends that called and said, hey, can you check on Chuck here? He's he's not been acting right. And so a few years back, that's where we were getting a lot of our calls. The ones that especially the ones I went on, were people that were already had been affected for months.
So we were being reactive instead of proactive, and I think that's the main difference I see today.
And
is we're being more
exactly.
proactive.
And some of the best of that are people that we helped through the years that see someone else and recognize that look that we have.
Oh, yes, sir.
And hey, man, have you talked to somebody with wellness? Have you talked? And the wellness as a whole, the mental health people, the people that the leadership, letting those mental health people come in, and the specialties that some of those people have, the military, some of the stuff, the change that they've made, I think that's all been a big success. Some of the military people that law enforcement are getting now or come out are used to having some type of help.
Right.
And I think that, but the one thing I'm the proudest of is the wellness units that have helped those guys that are now seeing other people and saying, "Man, you're in trouble.
Right.
You need to get help." And I the word of mouth, and I think that's where we're getting our biggest bang for the buck, because it's someone willing to share to someone else, "You're in trouble. I know you're in trouble because I was there." And I think that's one of the things. Of course, Zach and I both can talk about stuff that we've been through to someone,
Right.
and we're not always like what we look today. You got to go through trial and tribulation to get where you are today.
Well, and the two of you are so approachable that also makes you the right fit for the roles that you're in right now. At no point in time have I ever felt that I couldn't come and talk to you. You guys kind of have that aura about you, very approachable.
Well, thank you.
And I think that's a big part of it too, having the right people at the right time in the right
Yes, sir.
positions to be successful at this.
Absolutely. I think intentionality is a big part of it, and I love what you guys are saying. You know, it's interesting to me being in this environment that we're in every day. You think of a law enforcement environment. Some of the strongest people I know, the most courageous people I know, I get to walk down the hall and see them every day. What's interesting is those same people are going, "How are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Can I check on you? How are you?" I've never had that. And I came from a ministry background. I mean, you didn't see that a lot. Even in the churches, a lot of times you didn't see a lot of that. And I'm not, obviously, but it's very interesting that we now recognize, hey, what's going on with you? I want to check on you. I notice your behavior's a little bit different. Are you doing okay? In a law enforcement environment. Because the reality is, if we're not okay, how are we going to help people?
Right.
You can't give people what you do not have. And if you're in short supply,
Right.
if your tank is drained, how can I help somebody else?
Yeah, and why are we afraid to be vulnerable? You know,
Yes, sir.
I mean, the strongest warriors in history had a side to them that was very vulnerable, you know, and so I think we've got to just get past that
Absolutely.
that stigma.
Well, we talk about it a lot. You know, the greatest warriors were also poets,
Philosophers.
artists, farmers.
Yeah.
You know, they had a balance in their life to it. And, you know, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and it took me forever to realize I've got to find a balance. And we've talked about it at length. So, man, that is the greatest thing, is that culture now is hopefully changing. The guys, when we walk away, man, there's going to be a new generation of law enforcement to take it to another level. That's awesome.
You know, we talk about trauma, and we mentioned this in a different podcast, but the average person, the normal citizen, in their lifetime will have 6 to 10 major traumatic incidences, a horrific car wreck or loss of a loved one or something like that. But the average police officer throughout their career will have between 600 to 1,000 traumatic incidences, sometimes multiple a day, as we all know. And so the cumulative effect of that over time is a problem. And being able to let that steam off, have people to check on you, have mechanisms in place. Because we're not built to withstand that amount of trauma. I mean, nobody is. And so you have to be able to cope with it. I know that you've had a number of challenges, but you've had one specific challenge that was very traumatic that you had to go through.
Yeah,
And,
speaking of the culture back then, you know, of that incident, I'm glad to see that the agency has completely changed. Because at that point in time, the culture was, when that incident took place, there was no, are you okay? There was no push for counseling. There was no, do you need time? It was, when are you coming? So with that being said, most of the time officers that go through their entire career sometimes never have to face, the ultimate, which is being a recipient of a firearm or having to discharge a firearm. But unfortunately I was. And that event left me in a situation to where at that point in time, the wellness that we're talking about was a wellness that I did not receive, during my career. And so just because a person is not in a leadership position doesn't mean that they're not a future leader,
That's powerful.
Yeah, well, we teach day one that you're a leader.
That's correct.
The moment you put the badge on and swear your oath, the reality of the situation is you're leading.
You're leading.
You're leading.
And so the care is, nourishment is to be fed all the time, because at some point, just because they're not there, they're seeking, they're looking, and they still knowing, that they need that full attention, they need that growth, to make them well equipped. So with that being said, as the time went past my incident, and I guess we'll go back to it, it just so happened that the crisis response team was developing. So I had never been debriefed. And it wasn't until a time of going out and you're helping, and then at the end of the team meetings that we're doing these debriefings. And, one of the Major Edie said, Zach, he said, man, when you tell your story, he said, so much passion behind it. He said, it's like it's just happening. He said, when's the last time you've been debriefed? I said, what's a debrief?
Yeah, never happened.
Yeah,
Never happened.
What's a debrief?
Yeah.
And he said, oh my goodness, are you serious? And I didn't realize, that I had never had anybody to come up to me to ask me, are you okay?
Wow.
Because it was considered to probably be vulnerable to say at that time that I'm not.
We tell the story, Kelvin and I, it took me 26 years in the profession before I ever talked about my issues. I was 26 years deep in the profession before I ever sat down and actually talked to a peer, counselor, therapist, whatever you want to label them, to unload some of this stuff. Man, that's way too long. You were 20 years. And so you were several years past your incident before you ever even had a debrief. I mean, we've got to change that.
Absolutely.
We've got to change that.
If you don't mind me asking, what happened for you to make it to 26 and you to make it to 20 before?
Yeah, so for me personally, I hit a wall. I was so busy taking care of everybody else that I was failing miserably personally, and I just hit a wall. I mean, it was a critical wall, one of those that you can't come back from. And so you had to make a decision that it's time. See, fixing to bring the tears.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Bring the tears.
I think we all feel it.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And the people, try to say this carefully. I'm trying to say this
look at him
carefully.
before I get to breaking.
The people that don't understand law enforcement, first responders, and what they go through to serve in the capacity that they do, you go from, I joke with the fire department, you go from saving a cat out of a tree to saving a life in the burning fire, to law enforcement, to stopping someone who's having a bad day driving 20 over the limit, to pulling somebody out of a wreck that's
Mangled.
on fire.
Yeah.
And people don't realize the effect that has on you. And you can't do that, any of those professions, day in and day out, and then go back into, it's just like the military. You can't do that day in and day out and then just go back into a regular life, and I'm walking down the street with my kids. You can't do that, because every little trigger that has happened to you in your job puts you right back to where you were at that time in that place. And for years and years and years, people have not, in the profession itself, because of that private standoff, I won't talk about you if you don't talk about me.
Sure.
And we fail miserably in everything but the law enforcement. Your personal life, your home life, your recreation time, because you're too scared to let everything, it's going to unravel if you talk about it. And you got to get ahead of that, because not only have you suffered, but everyone around you that loves you has suffered. And we got to get ahead of the game, and the people in first responders, those calls are not going away. We've been to more officer-involved shootings in the last 2 years than we have in my whole career, just about. And all the people that's affected, we got to get ahead of that, because if we keep the same mentality as we had 30 years ago when you and I first started, we're going to have a warped bunch of first responders if we don't get ahead of that and fix that.
Yeah, and it's not that the statistics haven't just jumped off the map. It's not that we're having more officer-involved shootings today than we were necessarily 10 years ago. It's that it's being accepted to try to address those issues. So can I put you on the spot? Go ahead. Just a little bit. So 2006, is that correct?
2006, yes, sir.
2006. You actually hadn't been with the state that long, have you?
6 months, maybe?
Yeah, 6 months.
6 months.
Working in your hometown, right?
Hometown. Yes,
Working
sir.
in your hometown, routine traffic stop.
Correct.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary. No, sir.
You feel like talking us through it?
Yeah. So if you can kind of set the picture, how they tell those stories, they had all the theatrics and the things behind it. But on this particular day and time, I was working a day shift there in Malvern, Hot Spring County, and my aunt, we never really knew at the time what was her sickness, what was going on with her, but she was in the hospital. The nurse had left out, and she fell, because he was getting ready to bathe her. So, man, she went from talking into basically, like full paralysis, only can move her neck. So anyways, I was working a day shift. So, got that on your mind, but you're out there, you're 6 months as a new trooper, so you're trying to make certain that you are pressing your bosses, new administration, so you're learning all the new stuff all over again.
Get that shiny bag and that big S on your chest, right?
Crease-
Shiny badge and
Crease is so sharp you can cut bread with it.
fitted,
talking about.
tight bicep shirts,
There's special orders.
Even if I tailor them all the way down, my shirts are still loose, but that's all right. So I'm working that morning, and I get a call from an officer. He's deceased now, but his name was Officer Freddie Flood. Never forget him. When I was going to school at UCA, he used to see me on campus, and he would always stop and talk to me. He would always make certain that you're going to class and you're going to work and your grades up. Well, he called, and he was like, he had a good friend that was going to be preaching at church that Sunday. He was taking over the church, and he didn't have any social connection, so he was asking me if I could kind of meet with him and just be a guest at his church that day. So I said, yeah. He said, well, he'll be through probably about 5, exchange the telephone number, so forth. So my shift would have ended at 4 o'clock, but I was going to stay past my shift to be able to meet the new pastor, and I'm new, so I didn't mind working over.
Right.
Wasn't overtime then; it was just free time. So you didn't mind. The zone was a 45-mile-an-hour zone. I'm working stationary radar. I'm facing westbound. The gentleman's coming east, and as all officers will have a tolerance, he met the tolerance of what I would go after. He's well over 20 over the posted speed limit. So I activated my lights to conduct a traffic stop, and as we're trained, nothing at this point seemed abnormal. He's not increasing speed. He seems to be reacting to the lights. He's reducing the speed. He has his blinker, indicating that he's getting ready to turn, which would be the westbound on-ramp to go back west on 30. So at this point, everything is still looking like it's going to go fine. I start, getting up behind him pretty quick, trying to close that gap and make certain if it was going to be a pursuit, he's not getting too far ahead of me. But he's not, like I said, there increasing speed, so he pulls onto the shoulder. I call, the traffic stop in. I make, my exit out of the car. Driver's side approach was still more prevalent than passenger side then. So I made my way up to the car. I give my bias-based police statement. Trooper Owens, Arkansas State Police. The reason I pulled you over was exceeding the posted speed limit. I want to say he was like 63 and a 45. Can I see a driver's license, proof of insurance? So he hands me his driver's license. So at this point, I got the license, and I say, do you have your proof of insurance? Well, he hands me a thick envelope, and I never like to go through any personal property. I only want to the things that I articulate or the things I ask for is what I wanted to retrieve. So I said, hey, I don't go through personal property. I said, if you'll go ahead and continue to look for your insurance, I said, I'll be watching, and you just hand it to me when I get back. He said, so he's like, okay. I go back to the car, I run him. He comes back with light traffic history, no criminal history. So, you hear seasoned officers to say, if in a sense of danger, the hairs on the back of your neck would stand up if something was happening, but either I got defective hairs on my neck or or something just wasn't right.
But there was nothing.
There was nothing.
Nothing.
So he came back with nothing, as far as a criminal check that would make you think, okay, yes, be on extra guard. I'm watching him as best I can, from my unit. You can see his eyes looking at me in his rearview mirror. So my thought process is the anticipation of watching me get out with the ticket book, because there was no e-sight at that point. It was still the hard copy. So he's looking at me, I'm looking at him. I'm kind of trying to stay with training, so the ticket book's up, so you can
Good job.
keep your
Yes,
eye
sir.
contact on him. So at this point, I make my determination, because there again, I'm hometown. So I want the articulation for court. I always try to work not at the moment. I work with court in mind. What would the audience in court, what would my judge and my prosecutors, what are they looking at? So at this point in time, by reasonable standards, I know that I've given this gentleman a reasonable amount of time to find his insurance, but I haven't cited him for it yet. But I have cited him for the speeding because he's passed the threshold in which I, give tolerance for. I make my second approach, which normally, on most of the time, we're about to complete business on the second approach. So there was no added threat level there, even though I'm still trying to be vigilant of my presence, but I'm not feeling an extra threat at this point, because now I've got the identifiers that
Know who he is.
I would know who he is.
Yeah. You've called it in.
Called it in.
Right.
So, like I said, not that we take exhale, but you're thinking we're almost through
Almost done.
the traffic stop, but I'm still trying to be that professional trooper to where he can't go to court and say, well, he didn't give me enough time to look for my insurance. So I make my second approach, and I said, did you find it? Mind you, I'm on the driver's side. We're on the ramp, so I'm trying to make sure I watch my back, and I'm watching him. Visually, I didn't see anything that stood out, as far as any weapons or anything. I'm trying to read and assess him as best I could. Couldn't smell any odor of intoxicants emitting from his breath. His eyes, didn't give the indication at that time when I'm looking at it, it was impaired. Everything that I'm inquiring, he's able to answer, where he was coming from, the articles that I needed, driver's license and so forth. So he's not giving me the indication that he's impaired. So at this point, I bladed back around the back of the car to let the last vehicle pass by. As I get back to the window, I'm waiting, of course, for him to steal. At this point, he's reaching not in a haste movement, but he reaches up under the driver's seat. And by the time he gets halfway up under, the weapon halfway out, that's when I realize, okay, he's pulling the weapon. So at that point, I don't know. I always, joke about this part of it, but I always said, I guess my legs reacted before my brain actually reacted, because the legs said, hey, move, create distance.
Find it, sir.
So, I started to turn to try to run. But at this point, action beats reaction, right?
Yeah,
so,
every time.
He punches out. I'm right there. It's, point blank range. So I'm at the pillar of the window. And he punches out, and, the gun goes off. Boom. So I feel the muzzle blast, but I didn't know I was struck. So at this point, I'm like, okay, this is not warning shots. He's trying to hurt. So, at this point, at state, our dress uniform at this time, because it's January, so we're in a Class A long sleeve uniform. Yep. But weapons training was totally different then. We didn't train in our Class A uniform and Class A gear. We trained in utility gear. So at that point, trying to draw your weapon, the weapon set higher as opposed to lower. It was a leather holster, not a molded holster. So I'm trying to retrieve it as as I'm running.
Muscle memory.
Right. And like, hey, I can't get this thing out. But some phenomenal things happen. Now, mind you, his driver's license is clipped to my ticket book, right? And I flung that ticket book as I took off running. I probably could have outran anybody in 100 meters at that point. I was moving. But I flung the ticket book. So as I'm running, I'm trying to draw my weapon, and I'm calling on my handheld. I was able to call in the driver's license number each time on the radio, the complete driver's license number. Mind you, the clothing description of the suspect, make and caliber of the weapon that shot me. Brother. That was some pretty phenomenal things. I was like, the brain is interesting. It can remember what it wants to remember, and it can forget what it wants to forget.
That's
right?
amazing.
Suspect is going to be driving Arkansas 742 KDJ, 74 KDJ, Hot 30 eastbound.
Yeah, so I mean, that whole interaction is just seconds, right?
Just seconds.
Seconds from the time he grabbed the gun, punched out the window, and fired his shots.
Yes,
and you're trying to find cover at that point.
Correct.
That's a matter of a couple seconds.
I'm telling you, I tried to recreate as far as remembering the license. I got about 4 numbers and had to look back at it.
Yeah.
But I get to the back of my unit, finally, get the weapon out, to return fire just in case it's getting ready at this point to be a firefight. But at that point, the suspect had then took off.
Yeah, he's running.
I guess he went maybe about 300 yards or more, give or take, wrecks out. Well, as I'm punched out, blood's squirting from my neck, and the stuff you see in movies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're feeling, and I've never had that much blood in my hands.
Wow.
And so it was so slick, I couldn't feel the hole, but I just knew I kept, raking a bunch of blood in my hand. So there was a motorist that was waiting to merge on the ramp. So at this point, I'm not knowing if I'm being ambushed or not, but I'm out now. And he's like, whoa, trooper. He said, I saw the whole thing. And I said, well, I got to go get him. And he's like, no, trooper, you got a pretty good hole inside of your neck. I don't think you need to go anywhere.
What my neck look like?
I mean, you get shot.
Never have I? You duck my neck.
I don't know what you got. You're bleeding real bad.
So I've never been in a point of my career, mind you, 2.5 years of working, to where as the hero, as they would call us, that now I'm questioning, do I continue with knowing that I got a neck injury and I'm losing quite a bit of blood, or do I wait, for help, because I don't want to put myself in a position to where if I get there and he's able to take advantage of me, as far as my weapon and so forth. So the gentleman was like, help is coming, trooper, you're bleeding pretty bad. So I got on the radio and, called it over to Troop K. But at that point, several things happened. Different uniform as far as what we, work out of, as far as, gun, range. And then we had the rack pack system to where the handheld system, my frequency was, the city was overriding my frequency, so they wasn't hearing any of my transmission. So I got back to the unit to where I was able to actually get out. And so at that point, I was like, K31 Hot Springs, and that was the call sign. And any trooper is happy when they get their first call sign issued. And,
sure.
And I was K31. So at that point, it said K31 Hot Springs, did you get my transmission? And I laughed because you could tell, like, if you're in law enforcement, the relationship between the officer and the dispatcher, it was kind of like, what transmission? Yeah, what transmission?
He's
31?
working over. It's past his duty time. Making another traffic stop. Yeah.
You could tell, because the very next follow back up was Hot Springs. I've been shot. You could tell at that point it was like, let me power down solitaire real quick. But nevertheless, so I called it back in. I was like, Hot Springs, I've been shot. Suspects is westbound I-30. Clothing description, so forth, so forth. One thing I wanted to touch on was, in times of need, officers are always there, to take care of the public needs. And even though we don't realize that we're doing wellness, those officers who were there for me, who arrived on scene, didn't realize as wellness they were keeping me calm. They were just like, hey, they're looking how many times did he shoot Zach? They're trying to see, if they're feeling for holes. And so the first responders get on scene. And naturally, with it being a neck injury,
Yeah.
they're getting ready to want to immobilize you, right? But before they want to immobilize you, what do they want to do? They want to cut your clothes off.
You
Oh,
bet,
yeah.
brother.
Yeah. Don't touch my uniform.
I said, wait a minute. Right now, I can't tell how bad it is, but I'm not hurting. You know, I guess the endorphins had kicked
Yeah,
in. So
endorphins, adrenaline.
So, but I was like, if this is just a graze, you know, state's not paying for this uniform. I got to pay to get this thing dry cleaned. So
The important things in life, right?
So they was like, Zach, are you serious? I was like, absolutely. You are not cutting this uniform off me. So they was like, oh man. So they're over there trying to pop buttons with me as quick as they could. So they get the uniform off. Well, I was fine. It was ironic at the time, but my father was chief of police at the time. I had passed him that morning as I was going into town, and he was outboard. And my dad, for whatever reasons, never waved like you would think normal. Well, with that, he always waved with these four fingers, you know. That's his signature wave. So I waved at him, always proud, you know. So he heard the transmission and happened to pull up on scene not long after it happened. He was wearing a white shirt, kind of like Chuck. And so I was just like, okay, well, he's getting that shirt dirty today, you know, because I need some comfort, you know, some reassurance, because like I said, you know, until you're faced with the reality of true life or death, I don't think some people have that sensitivity of how precious every breath means. So at that point, paramedics get there, and they finally, of course, decide, okay, hey, Zach, okay, it's time to get you down. Well, at that point, I think is where the panic came in, because they wanted to lay me flat. And I said, hey, do me a favor and prop me up. And they was like, oh, man, we can't, you know, you got a neck injury, we don't know, and this and that. I said, well, can you tell me if I'm going to live or die? And it was like, no, we can't, man. I said, well, then if this might be my last breath, I don't want to go out on my back. Prop me up so I can see the world, because this is where I feel more at peace.
Wow.
And so they prop me up, run me to the hospital. You work around all of the people in your community. You get to know your community. You're just an extension of your community. The ER nurse and doctors come in. They run me back to CT and run all the scans they can. And you're waiting, because every time you're on scene, you're usually the person that people are looking to for the reassurance of saying, everything's going to be okay. We're going to investigate. We're going to find. We're going to take care. But at this point now, you find yourself on the receiving end. And you hope that the extension of how you've been to everybody, now you get that care, that they want to take care of you,
Well,
right?
You've now become the victim,
You kinda
the
become the
patient,
victim.
the customer, so to speak. And
You're exactly right.
It's foreign to us.
It really is. But when a doctor comes out and starts to cry as they grab your hand, that's not the reassurance that you're thinking that you're getting ready to get. Right? You know,
So was your dad one of the first on scene?
second. Well, let me see. Correction. He was third on scene. Malvern units were first on scene.
Yeah.
I want to say Rockport was second, and I think my dad was like the third unit on scene.
So just for full disclosure, I think your dad's pulled me over in Perla before, just maybe going to Sheridan or something like that along the way. So I've met your dad.
Oh, wow.
He probably doesn't remember that, but I do. So
Yes,
I
sir.
remember the white shirt, right?
Yes, sir.
But man, I can't imagine Dad pulling up on the scene. I don't know if that was a comfort or if that was.
It was a true comfort.
Was it? Okay.
It was. If it makes any sense, of all the elements that could have been in place on that date and time, all the elements were in place. As far as just from the motorists who stopped, from the officers who responded, citizens that came together, you know, just everything that could be in place that would bring you any comfort in a traumatic time was in place. And like I said, the doctor, when she came in, she grabbed my hand, and so I said, you know, can you tell me, you know, am I going to be okay? And she said, all I can do for you, Zach, at this point is pray for you. And so, you know, I had to come to peace at that point at 23 years old?
Yeah, man.
At 23, I had to come to peace that I thought being, you know, I graduated from troop school with a physical fitness award. I'm in great shape. I'm only 23 years old. You know, so I take care of myself. I thought longevity was promised.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know at that point it was challenged, but I had to come to peace with whatever the faith was gonna be. That if I wasn't gonna make it, you know, this was a career that I chose, and I, you know, would go out proudly knowing that I did what I could for the people, you know, at the time of my reign. But I got to the hospital. We went through several testing and different things like that. And finally, they decided that where the bullet lodged in the neck, it would do too much harm to try to remove it. So they decided just to leave the round, in the neck. Fast forward, the ironic thing was the investigators, when they were talking to me, they was like, oh, it was probably just a .22 caliber bullet and so forth. Your mind probably made it to be that big. And if you go back and read my statement, it was the exact Smith & Wesson 9mm that I told him that it was.
And that 3 seconds of the entire encounter, you were able to do that.
It's phenomenal.
Wow.
It's phenomenal.
Just amazing mindset that you had at that moment. I'm glad you're here, brother.
Thank you.
I want to start by saying that, but what an immense amount of training. So yeah, you were 6 months as a state trooper, but 2.5 with Malvern PD. So
Right.
the amount of training you had, I know a lot of seasoned officers who probably couldn't have done that at that moment. So it is truly a lot for you as an individual, your upbringing, your father, your mother, you've already mentioned them, how they raised an amazing young man to when the chips are down, you were able to do what you needed to, brother.
Thank you.
So individual crashes out 300 yards away, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Fleet's on foot at that point?
That's correct.
And then kind of take us through, through all that stuff of what you've been told.
Okay. So at that point, when I tell you, I look back, and I don't even think at this amount of time since the incident has happened, I've got a chance to thank everybody that participated in that event. But nevertheless, crashes out, goes on foot. So we know that he's probably between the 98 and 97 mile marker contained in that area of the interstate and, that area. So I think the incident takes place about 4:30 in the afternoon. And so therefore, ADC comes over, they bring their units in. All law enforcement agencies
Yeah,
start.
you got multiple counties there at that point. I mean, Garland County's there.
Yes,
Hot Spring, Malvern, Rockport, State. I mean, everybody and their brothers on scene at this
It
point.
was
Constables.
Yeah.
It was something to see. Now I'm in the hospital, and it really was like a movie type thing because you're in the hospital, and you want to be out there.
Yeah.
And it's ironic because what you're seeing on TV, they're out there because of you,
Sure.
And I'm like, they could have been anywhere, home with their families, but you got officers who came from home, checking 10-8 to get out to help. So nevertheless, they had a manhunt for him, and it was like I said, from 4:30, and I want to say somewhere around the 1 o'clock hour is when he was apprehended. There again, you would think or hope that a suspect, knowing that at this point, trying to attempted capital murder on an officer, would hopefully, maybe at this time be ready to give up. But that wasn't the case. Just so happened, some officers cornered him up around the Super 8 motel. Officer Cheney was one of them. And at this point, they ordered the suspect, to turn around and show him their hands and so forth. Well, he still had the weapon that he shot me with on him. So he still had the weapon on him. Of course, the one spent round that he shot at me, full mag. And in his pocket was a box of Winchester 100 rounds, full metal jacket ball ammo that he had on him. So thank goodness that with the way that they, approached him and was able to get to him, that they didn't find themselves in the same situation that I was in, and they was able to apprehend him, take him into custody and so forth. And then, of course, we go to trial.
Sure.
And I think he got a whopping 7 years.
Wow.
Seven years.
Wow.
77?
7 years is how much he's actually served. I
One
think
more
they
than
gave him.
6. Right.
They
Seven
gave him.
years.
Yeah, they
Seven,
gave
bro.
him. I think want to say 15, and then some additional. But what he wound up serving was around 7.
Yeah.
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 That's,
So you're in the hospital
Yes,
at
sir.
that point. Do you stay? I take it you were transported over to Hot Springs?
To Baptist. Oh, so we transferred from Malvern at that time.
Okay, so went to Malvern.
To Baptist in Little Rock.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir. So after some, several scans and so forth, the oral surgeon came in and made his determination that, they were going to leave the round
Yeah.
in. So I think at that point I get discharged somewhere into the wee hours of the night.
That night you got released.
I got
Same
released.
night, okay.
Same
Bro.
night.
you were
Now,
spitting blood
Yes.
7 hours before you were released, 8 hours before you were released, and then you're sent home.
And then didn't go to sleep until Monday.
Yeah.
I was so afraid to close my eyes.
Yeah.
Because I had seen minor traffic incidents where we worked wrecks and internal bleeding was going on with,
Sure.
some of them and didn't know it, and then they pass. So in my mind, you know, I'm thinking, if I close my eyes, I'm not going to wake up. I didn't go to sleep until Monday.
Yeah.
And I tell you, when your body decides it's had enough,
It shuts down.
It'll
It
let
shuts
you,
down.
It'll let you know. It'll let you know.
So, let me ask you this. So, you've helped a lot of officers since then.
Thank you.
We know that. Think about your journey to get back to work. And I know we've kind of talked about this offline just a little bit. But the lack of resources that you had to deal with the shooting, the trauma, the emotional, spiritual, mental aspect of it, did you have the support you needed?
You know, as much as I love my agency, stand behind us, you know, we're making good grounds for where we come from. At the time, we were just geared different, you know.
Yeah. I don't think it was
Right.
unique to ASP by any means.
Right.
I think it was just the culture that we lived in at the time, right?
Right. So with that being said, you know, incident had just happened. I got a call that Monday, and the call went as so forth. It said, "Hey Zach, when are you coming back to work?" So I'm like, "Well, nobody's told me, you know, how long I could take off." And they was like, "Oh, well, you can take off as long as you need to, but you don't have any sick leave."
Brother.
So I was like, well, what does that mean? And so then they explained, of course, I guess the FMLA, which is at that point I never heard of it because I never took off. I was never a person who called in sick. So I'm like, well, I can't afford to be off and not get paid. So from the time that the incident happened on a Saturday, I was seen by, what's the doctor that does the evaluation?
Right. I know who you're talking about.
But
Psychologist.
psychologist. So if it wasn't for the fact that I had to see a psychologist to make sure that I was fit for duty, I would have been back to work on Tuesday. But because I had to wait for the evaluation to be done, I think I came back to work on like a Wednesday. So from a Saturday to Wednesday, I'm back to work with gauze, you know, over the wound, and I'm back, you know, in uniform. So, and then from there, you fast forward a little bit, and we have like a troop meeting. And so at the troop meeting, you know, there's the old TV VCR combination. So I'm thinking, okay, we're probably getting ready to have something, a presentation about new insurance. And so the TV VCR combination's in the front, everybody's around. Mind you, I'm 6 months out, so I'm getting all kinds of the rookie stories and this, you know, cutting myself, worse shaving, you know, talking about this. So it was all kind of ridicule. But nevertheless, the lights go off. And so, you know, we're sitting there, everybody's waiting for it to come on. Well, guess what pops up on the TV as soon as the light go off?
No, brother.
K31. So, of course, suspense gets anybody because you're thinking to yourself, like, how close was I? You know, I know it says point blank range, but was my point blank range definition from here to the door, or was I actually point blank range? But then I'm like, if I get up and leave out of this room, they're going to say he's milking this or he's wanting sympathy, you know, and you start to think that you hear the stories of the previous troopers and you're thinking that you haven't earned your seat at the table. And then after you earn your seat at the table, you find out that those troopers have never experienced what you've been through, that you have went through something that they had never encountered, but they made you think that at the time. And so when the lights go out, the movie starts to play, and then you see your video, and then you're listening to yourself. And then the moment that the gun goes off, because it's fresh, you find yourself reacting just like you did when it happened.
You got to remember, you were never debriefed.
Never
You've never unpacked any of this.
Right.
And so you watching your own video in that setting.
And you're talking about a week to
Right.
10 days?
Not too long after it happened,
Yeah.
you know, it's there. And so then you're hearing yourself with labored breathing. And so in your mind, labored breathing normally means most
You're
time
struggling.
you're struggling. And so with that being said, you see that there was no, hey, you're going to counseling. There was no see some wellness. There was no peer. You're seeing that you can't take off because you have no sick leave. At this point, 6 months in, you don't have much leave built up as far as annual leave. So you're stuck to work every day as if it didn't happen. And every time, because it's new, people have heard about your incident. So every time you're going somewhere, people are talking to you and asking you about it.
This is the last thing you want to talk about.
Officers and so forth. And so to public and to the officers, you want to make it seem that you're okay. But then by the time you walk through the door, and this is the 10-8 podcast, but nobody talks about the 10-7.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Brother. Wow.
The 10-7.
So how have you used? It's pretty obvious. I think it's you're going to laugh at me for asking the question, but how have you used all that to be the wellness officer you are today? I mean, you've got the lived experience, right? And so you've learned from that,
Right.
I mean, so how? Obviously, that's helped you.
You remember when we were talking earlier, we were talking about the leadership, we do the leadership now. And so some people might not know the exact tools or the terminology for certain things, but it don't mean they don't know how to be treated or want to be treated. And I've always known how I've always wanted to be treated. And I've always known that in this, I think any one of us in this room before we was in a supervisory role, we always critiqued and said how we would be if we were supervisors.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Exactly.
Sure.
And I always said that I would never leave anyone behind. I would always try to take care of them the best I could. And so with that being said, I have never lost sight just because it was a personal injury to me. But I know if I felt that way, or if I craved a little bit more care, that there had to be other people that probably was craving the same thing. And each incident is individual, so I don't make my incident to be more significant than anybody else's. Because trauma is always,
Trauma's
different.
trauma.
It's trauma's trauma, right?
Right.
And it's a significant thing to where, it's a turning point for the better or for the worse, which is a crisis. So with that being said, that's why I decided to take and channel all the energy and emotions that I felt that I was wanting, the nurturing, like we talked about as a child. Child has to be nurtured. And I said to myself, if I was ever in a position to where I could, then I wanted to make certain that somebody felt that care, that nurturing. And so I used that to channel my strength while I've been in this wellness position.
You know the saying, "We are our brother's keeper."
Yes, sir.
So that's the role you're in now.
Yeah. Talk about a why now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that we do with all of our basic students is day one, we have them write their why. Why did you want to become a police officer? And we explain to them that it changes, through positions and events and stuff like that. But man, your why, I mean, you both have a servant's heart. You wouldn't have picked this position. You wouldn't have chosen this path if you didn't have that in the first place. And now your why is men and women you haven't even met yet. It's somebody across this great state that you're like, I want to nurture, I want to help, I want to be 59 years old, sir, and take care of that 26-year-old. And so, man, it's amazing how your why now becomes your passion and your drive every day, that when you get to put on the shirt and tie or the uniform, that you're like, I don't know who I'm going to help, but my why is I'm going to help. Man, that's amazing, brother.
Jason, so,
Thank you.
We talk about these basic students a lot, but when we're teaching our senior level officers, we still ask them what their why is.
Really?
And why has it changed since day one. I think if we were to ask you your why as a brand new rookie 6 months in, your why is different now because you've learned.
Correct.
You've processed a lot. You've seen a lot. And I would say your why now is more driven than it was 20 years ago.
Absolutely. I think just as in within life and definitely within his career, each year I think you get a chance to peel the veil back a little bit. You look through things from one side of the picture, and then sometimes you get a chance as the years go by to look at it from a different picture, and you're like, whoa. You see the picture totally different than you've seen the picture before, and you're thankful. You're thankful for that opportunity to serve if this is truly, what you're being called to do. You're thankful.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing to me to think of now you're leading the recruiting. I mean, you're the face of ASP.
He is the face.
He is the face.
He's the
Yeah,
poster.
he's the spokesmodel.
Yeah, but he is.
But all these new officers are coming. Almost all of them have some type of contact with you.
right.
And for you to be able to serve in that capacity as an amazing representative for resiliency, for wellness, I mean, you are a phenomenal example of that, Zach. I'm just so impressed.
That means a lot, and I thank each and every one of you in here today. I really do. And every person that I've came in contact with, I let them know I have never lost that feeling of what it was like when you get your first opportunity to finally put a uniform on.
Yeah.
Whether it was with Malvern PD or when it's with state police. And with that being said, I try to give them everything that I have to give them of that passion and that drive to give them that feed that hopefully, gets them to that next level that they want to be. But it's staying connected, because this passion that I love so dearly, and that's a book that I said that I was going to write. My passion became my pain is the name of the book that I'm going to write. And I never want the last contact that anybody's ever had with me to not be as most inspirational and positive as it could be. And so that's what I pour, of not losing that feeling of what it was like when you call somebody. I know how it is when you want that phone contact or you get that automated, voice, and you're eager. So I try to pour as much as I can into the position of recruiting, as much as I can into the position of wellness, because I, unfortunately, and hopefully no other has experienced that, know what it's like of not knowing if you're going to get that next opportunity to go 10-8.
So we talk about resiliency, and you think about, you go through that traumatic event. Did you ever question coming back into law enforcement?
No. So ironically,
Well, you really didn't have a choice. You had to be back at work the next day. 3 days later, what do you didn't have any sick time.
Okay, a valid point. Valid point, Director.
Okay. That was a good point. I'm glad you said that. So I never questioned coming back, but what I did question is at what capacity.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I did not think at that point that I wanted to stay on the highway. I thought at that point in time, CID was looking pretty good.
Yeah.
But I know I still wanted to be an officer, but I did not want to be on the highway. But as fate would have it, I never, since that incident, have ever stepped foot in CID.
So you're back 10-8
Yes, sir.
on the highway. What is the first traffic stop for you?
First traffic stop, and that was amazing. He's a major with the agency now, Major Run Casey. Not only was he my FTO, but he was who I rode with when I was coming back. So he always had a reputation of being courageous and so forth. So working with him in that transition coming back was really inspirational, because I knew that when I felt like I had the jump on me, I was like, nothing's going to happen with him. He's going to make sure everything is taken care of.
Right.
But so I'm working with him, getting back acclimated to the job again, which hadn't been that long, but just you're getting back going. Well, then when I finally get released, and start working on my own capacity, I stop a car, and guess what? It's dark, tinted windows.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't see into the car.
Worst approach you've ever made in your life, wasn't it?
Yeah, because you can't see in the window. You're trying not to look at this point. You know how it is. You can tell a seasoned officer versus a new officer just by the approach and demeanor. And so, I'm trying to tactically get up to the car. But like I said, trying to tap on the window. They won't roll the windows down at that point, so I can't see in the back seat, can't see in the front seat. So nevertheless, the anxiety, the emotions, they talk about, the stimulated heart rate. Well, it was probably at max heart rate. So the wind is coming down, but what happened, because, I know, making the story long, what happened was I realized at that moment, regardless of what you have been through, that person still might be their first time ever been on a traffic stop.
Yeah.
Might be their first time having an encounter with an officer. So you can't let your overthinking, your anxiety, emotions cost you to be any more than what you should be at that time, for that motorist. And so I knew then I was either going to have to figure out a way to cope with this to get myself back into a more relaxed manner as best we can, or I was going to have to exit this profession. And, thank goodness, the Lord above, provided me with that to get back, to be able to get those nerves to stay where they needed to be, to conduct a traffic
So you
stop.
met that challenge, and think about the people that you have blessed since then.
Yes.
Wow. We talk about God putting us in the right positions at the right time, the right seasons, for the right reasons. That's where you're at.
Thank you.
Both of you. I mean, you're both just the example and the epitome of what we want in this profession right now. You know,
Real heroes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those two are.
Yeah, and we all wish that we would have had two of you 30 years ago when we started. Maybe the scars would be less, the baggage would be a little lighter, right?
Right.
So,
We've both been very blessed.
Very blessed.
We've both been very blessed.
yeah.
And I believe wholeheartedly, back to your statement earlier, if you're blessed like we have been blessed, and we've both been blessed, but Zach's really been blessed in that incident. But you got to pay that forward. You owe that
Yes, sir.
to pay that forward.
Yes,
You know, it's amazing to me as a law enforcement officer whose son is now a 28-year-old law enforcement officer. The hope I have, this is the passion for us, that generation, you know, now seeing my son follow in those footsteps and knowing that there are resources available to him that were not available all those years ago. Gives him a better opportunity to continue to thrive and be a great husband and a father, and I am thankful for gentlemen like you that are standing in the gap for them. So thank you.
Yeah, so we want to get you guys back in here and talk about some other things at a future date. But I'm getting the timeout. It's over sign back over there. Wrap it up. So we wrap up every episode with this. First of all, we're extremely thankful for the governor for allowing us to serve in these positions of leadership, whatever they may be. We're in the right positions at the right time, doing what we're led to do. Secretary Hager for his leadership for the Department of Public Safety and ASP, and then our Attorney General for providing us the resources to sit down and have these conversations and push this information out to all 19 of our listeners.
301. 301, sir.
No, that's the subscribers. We're still at 19 or 20 listeners.
Yeah.
But what a blessing it's been today to sit around and help debrief your story. I know you've done it before, but different setting, and we're lucky today to get to share that with you and hear that from you. So from all of us at the 10-8 podcast, we'll see you next go around. Thank you.